Well, good afternoon and welcome to a 2019 Law Day discussion here with the DC Courts. I'm Jasmine Turner, and today we have both of our chief judges essentially as a form of further engagement so that we can engage with our audience, so that we can engage with the community that we serve, and so that we can engage with you at home. I'd like to introduce Chief Judge of the DC Court of Appeals, Miss Anna Blackburn-Rigsby.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, good
How are you,
afternoon.
Jasmine?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Good.
Wonderful. And also we have the Chief Judge of the DC Superior Court, Robert Morin.
Good afternoon. Excited to be here.
I'm so glad. Happy Law Day. Happy Law Day to everyone.
Law Day.
This is like a lawyer's favorite holiday, isn't it?
Well, sort of.
It actually is.
Something along those lines.
It's still a work day.
It is still a work day. Well, this is fun work for us today. I just want to have a conversation with you all just about the topics around this year's theme, which is free press, free speech, free society. And so my first question for you all is, how does free speech and a free press enable a free society?
I think it's a key core value that's part of our democracy. It's embedded in our Constitution that we have this wonderful gift of a democracy that has a judicial branch, a legislative branch, an executive branch. We need a free press to make sure that the citizens and the public have the information they need to participate in our democracy, and that's critical.
Participation is critical. What about you?
It is the First Amendment for a
The
reason.
first one, you say?
And I think it's probably the foundation of our democracy. Those two, right of free speech, right of free press, right to petition your government, and right of assembly are the four hallmarks of our democracy. And without them, we would not have the United States of America, in my opinion.
I agree. That's my opinion as well. And as judges, there are times when you all engage with the press, when you all have to talk to them. We've had some circumstances around those things. What do you find is most rewarding about engaging with the press, but also what do you find is most challenging about engaging with the press?
I think it's really important that we engage with the press, and I think it's maybe something that we could do more regularly. Then it's not quite as novel when we do. But I think it helps us communicate the story of the courts. I mean, the courts touch on every aspect of life for people who live and work and do business in the District of Columbia. And I think it helps the press understand how seriously we take the work that we do and how important it is for us to be connected to the community that we serve. And the press helps that.
Yeah.
The courts are a public institution. Our proceedings are available for anybody to look at. So to me, I've enjoyed talking to reporters because I think reporters want to get it right.
Right.
And they want to understand the decisions we make. As to the second part of your question, what's the difficulty? To me, the most difficult aspect is we're ethically limited
Right.
to not comment or talk about current cases, and that's usually what they want to talk.
Right.
Reporters want to talk about, and sometimes that's frustrating for both sides because
Right.
we would like to explain what's going on in our courtrooms, but we're prohibited from talking about individual cases, and so that's a very difficult dynamic to overcome.
Yeah.
But in general, talking to reporters generally about the court and our work, I enjoy it. I agree with Chief Judge Blackburn-Rigsby. It's an important part of our job to have the public understand what we're doing as a third branch of government.
Right. And it's so interesting that you talk about the difficulties because it really is both sides simply trying to do their jobs and do the
Correct.
things that they've been trained to do. As journalists, it's like you want every detail. As a judge, you're like, I can't give you any details. And so therefore coming together and having a conversation in which I think we can all better understand each other is so important. So I'm so glad that you touched on that.
Sometimes, though, it's too much detail. For the press, there's that tension of the court wanting to explain,
Right.
through the decisions and opinions that the court issues in cases, and not being able to explain it in a succinct way
Right.
can sometimes be frustrating because journalists have a deadline, and you want to be able to explain it simply.
Right.
So you don't want to have to wade through so much of the detail.
Right.
And so I think these kinds of opportunities are good for us to talk.
It's always interesting to me how certain cases get the spotlight. And when I talk to reporters, they talk about, well, the story is newsworthy. That's apparently a very important word in the news
It is.
business. You know, as judges, we think all the cases that come before us are important,
Right.
that no case is more important than the other one. But there is sort of entertainment value for the news coverage. They need newsworthy cases.
That's true.
And so sometimes it's frustrating that, you know, the focus seems to be on, in the trial court, on sensational cases,
Right.
as opposed to a lot of what we think are good things we're doing in the courthouse.
Right.
But it's not as entertaining.
It's-
So it's a sort of a clash of cultures in a
Yeah,
way.
it is. It absolutely is. I agree.
Well, some of these cases can be very.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
Oh yeah, if
entertaining.
you've been down to
Yes.
to the courthouse, you can definitely be entertained by just standing around, I would say. With all of the rapid changes that we're experiencing these days around the internet and technology, do you believe that social media, the internet, has changed the way that we engage with free speech at all?
I think definitely it has, and in some good ways, some very good ways, but also I think there's some downsides to it. I think the good thing is people have it enables and empowers people to know instantly what's going on around the world, in the community, and with cases. But sometimes I think if we're not careful, we lose sort of the human touch and the civility. To be able to think about what you say first. I know my mom and my grandma always said that to me, that, you know, words are powerful,
Yes,
and you have to be careful what you say to people, and how you interact with them. And sometimes one of the potential downsides of social media is that people don't always think, and they say something or put something out there that can be very hurtful to other people. But it does empower, it enables information to be shared more readily. It makes people more aware, and I think in a democracy, it helps people be better citizens, because we don't have a democracy unless people get involved, and involved in making sure our courts are strong and respond to the needs of the community, making sure that the other branches of government, the legislative branch and the executive branch, are doing their work. You need people to be engaged, and they have to have information.
Right.
Social media helps with that, I think.
To me, it's democratized news gathering,
I like that.
which I think has a lot of positive values to it. Before, a lot of the news gathering was centered on, you know, a couple of major corporate
Right.
entities, and now we have this citizen reporter entity, which has a lot of value. When I was growing up, we got our news from the evening newspaper. We had to wait for the evening newspaper. Now, it's instantaneous. The difficulty, especially in the trial court, where we have these cases that generate a lot of media, is how do we deal with people who self-identify as a citizen
Right.
journalist? And what are the standards that they adhere to?
Right.
We know from major media outlets there are journalistic standards.
Right.
But does everybody follow those standards? So it's, to me, very challenging, and it's only going to become more challenging. That doesn't deny the benefits
Right.
of people going out and having their voices heard. But as an institution who has to respond to the media, it becomes very complicated for people
Right.
like you in the Public Information Office as to how we respond, and becomes very nuanced and very complicated, because we do want the media to have access and the ability to report on cases,
Right.
but at the same time we have to make the proceedings dignified,
Right.
and make sure our protocols are followed,
Right.
and it becomes very challenging sometimes.
It
And
seems-
that's why we have public information officers to guide us
Yes.
through that morass.
Communications offices are important.
Yes, very important.
And I think even with all of that, as communication expands, there is a question of how do you streamline the information, how do you filter it, and how do you know what's accurate and what's not. So in a way, free speech has become the true entity of freedom,
Sure.
where you can truly say anything and someone will believe you.
Yeah.
And so it's different when you don't have a system that to regulate things like social
Exactly.
media.
And there's a difference with regard to social media between opinion
Right.
and reporting.
Right.
You know, and combining the two.
Right.
As I indicated, judges are not allowed to respond
Mm-hmm.
to or talk about cases that are pending before
Right.
them. At the same time, they may be subject to criticism,
Mm-hmm.
written opinions, and they're put in a very difficult position because we cannot respond to what we might believe is inaccurate opinions or
Right.
reporting about what's going on in front of us.
There's some tension too, you know, with free speech
Mhm.
and the ability to be the citizen reporter and say what you think with how the courts operate, where we have to we try to deal with facts
Right.
and the truth, and we have to make sure witnesses are sworn in and take an oath to tell the truth, and so sometimes there's a tension in what is the truth or the facts that the court is dealing with, and what may be the opinions that people want to share, and how do you separate those?
Correct.
So that it can sometimes make it difficult to respond in situations like
Technology is only going to make it more complicated. As you know, we don't allow pictures to be taken in the
Right.
courthouse.
Yeah.
And that's where the protection of the people come before us and witnesses who testify and the like. And yet, most of the major media outlets understand and follow that.
Yeah.
We've had instances of what I would call citizen journalists who just intuitively think, well, I'll just take a picture of the
Right.
proceedings, and they don't realize that it's a security risk.
Yeah.
So that's only going to get complicated as we go forward.
Now, there's a little difference though in some of the appellate proceedings, the oral arguments we call them at the Court of Appeals, where this is after there's been a trial or
Right.
another proceeding, and so you don't have the witnesses or the parties. You have the lawyers usually who are explaining to the court why they would like a change or a different verdict or decision, or like a decision revisited.
Right.
And those are actually live streamed. People can tune in and watch them if you want to, and you can tune in and listen to them.
Right.
But there's a different, not the same security concern that you
Right.
might have of jurors or witnesses. And you know, we try to balance the need for security in some proceedings with the court's view that we should be open and transparent.
Right.
And transparency is one of our values.
Right.
And you have to shine a light
Yeah.
on the court at all levels in order to really give people confidence that the courts are doing everything we can to serve them.
Yeah. Seems that the influx and the popularity of social media have made transparency and openness a balancing act, it seems, from what you all have told me. Why do you think it's important, though, even in the midst of the challenges and the tension, to uphold free speech in our society?
It's a linchpin of our democracy, I think. You know, every day in the court buildings on our Judiciary Square campus, we see thousands of people coming in the courthouse every day, and you know, I think that's really special. They believe, for the most part, that our court system works.
Right.
Now, does that mean everybody loves the outcome of their case? No. It means sometimes people win the case and sometimes they don't. But they, for the most part, I think still have faith in the process. And I think that's because there's free speech. There is reporting about it. The media has access to the court and to the proceedings. And when you promote and try to strive for it, it doesn't mean that we always get it right. I think people generally have confidence that this system works. And most disputes, because we have courts here in the district but across the country that work, are resolved peacefully. And that doesn't happen everywhere in the world.
Right.
And I think that's a special part of our democracy that we should value.
To me, we're DC.
Yeah.
We're the city of free speech and
Yeah.
assembly.
Yeah.
That's what the city is known for. That's what we invite. We invite people to come in and express their views.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of take pride in that, that a local demonstration, which may be a big event in another city, is Tuesday for Washington, D.C.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's
True.
one of many free speech events that we're going to have during the course of the year.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I enjoy that aspect of being in D.C. and walking by some protest or some speaker I don't even know what they're talking about, but I stop and listen because it's somebody else viewing their opinions and expressions of what need to be changed. So for me, that it's the free market of ideas. If you don't have the ability to express your ideas,
Right.
well, that's how we've improved as a society. Fundamental rights of free speech and assembly.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. A Tuesday in DC, it could be happening. Now, obviously, we'll switch gears a little bit here, but you both clearly went to law school, and we may have some lawyers watching right now, or I don't know if you maybe know any personally, but I'd love to know
It's
what.
DC, it's
Right,
lawyers.
that's a Wednesday for you, running into a lawyer. I'd love to know what your favorite subject was in law school that you enjoyed studying, and maybe even what maybe your biggest challenge in law school. Maybe if you'd like to share, just for encouragement.
This is ancient history. We're
Oh,
going back many,
no, ancient. It's a strong word.
I will tell you, I think Washington, D.C. is a great place to go to law school.
Mhm.
So I think the statute of limitation has passed, but I think my last semester in law school, I didn't go to any classes. I went down and watched the Watergate trials
Oh, wow.
that were going on.
Amazing.
I went to classes, but I spent a lot of time in the local courts watching trials. And that's how I
Yeah,
learned how good lawyers act.
hands-on learning.
So to me, it was sort of the courtrooms and clinics that we have in the city that offer students the opportunity to come to our local courts.
I love that. That's an
Mhm.
excellent perspective on learning.
Yeah, I chose to come to law school here, and I went to Howard University School of Law for a lot of reasons. A rich legacy of lawyers committed to, I think, strengthening our democracy, and that's what made me want to go to law school. I love being in D.C. I can remember the opportunities to go down on Capitol Hill during the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice nominee Clarence Thomas,
Wow.
and being an intern, a student intern that was able to go in
Wow.
and see those things, on a Wednesday if you want to. Favorite classes. I may be kind of showing my geeky side, but I actually loved law school. I really did.
No,
I loved it.
Judge, you loved law school?
I loved it, and worked harder than ever would have thought. But I was excited about the law and challenges. It was hard, but I
You
enjoyed
were passionate
it.
about it. You loved it, so it makes it a little less like work. And who knew that you all were out here witnessing history?
Yes.
on a Thursday, it may have been.
I have a secret too. I love the library, the law library. Now,
Oh my goodness!
I gotta tell you, we have all this technology to help with the
Right.
research
Right.
now, but every now and then I still like to just go into a law library and open up the books.
Actual
It
books.
feels
Yeah.
Back in the day.
There's a real book in your hand. I like that. What would you tell the law school version of yourself, knowing what you know now, having sat on the benches that you've sat on? What would you tell your law school version of yourself?
You want me to go?
Yes,
first?
I
Okay.
do.
You can
I was
say,
hoping
oh.
I was hoping that
Many
you
things, it seems.
I would
things.
say, I try to tell students this, that practicing law is a privilege. It's not a right. And it's a profession. It's not a business. It's a service profession. And keep that in mind when you're going through law school. You should take opportunities to represent people if you can in a clinic. And as a lawyer, you should always take the opportunity to represent people who can't afford to be represented, because that should be part of our service as a profession. I understand going to law school now is a lot different than when I went to law school. The pressures of student loans and are very difficult. But just keep in mind that it is not a business, it's a profession. We should treat it that way.
Service.
I would say couple things come to mind.
Okay.
Is that, you know, we sometimes in a place like DC where there's so many lawyers. I mean, we have one of the largest bars in the country in terms of the number of lawyers here. We forget how important and critical the skills that a lawyer can learn are to helping people
Right.
with their everyday issues. And so, you know, reading through a difficult contract may be something that you're trained to do as a lawyer, but to somebody who's struggling,
Right.
it means the world. And so not forgetting that the law is about people, and that in these cases that we handle, which involve sometimes very complex issues, sometimes very basic issues, they are important issues for the people who
Right.
bring them and entrust them to you. And so trying to remember, you know, I say my grandma and my mom, I quote them a lot, but they used to say, to whom much is given, much is expected in
Right.
return. And education, and the legal education is a gift that is, I feel, was given,
Right.
not given, because you have to earn it, but you have to use that to help other people. And otherwise, what is it? And there's so many people in this city who need help. We always talk a lot about the justice gap that
Right.
we, in a city where we have hundreds of thousands of lawyers, every day in our courts, people come to court without lawyers because they can't afford them. And that I would just remind young lawyers and law students about this gap, and that there are not too many lawyers for the people who really need them,
Right.
and that they have a responsibility to give back. And the other thing I would say, I don't know who told me this, but I call it my duck syndrome story, that, you know, there's a tendency sometimes to look at people and you think, oh wow, that lawyer or that judge or somebody is so smart. They make it look so easy. So I think about the duck. You see a duck sort of gliding, and it looks really cool. They're just floating along.
Right.
But if you look underneath, they are paddling and working really hard. And that I would tell law students that you can never stop working. It's hard work every day. But if it's work that you love, and I hope that you choose this profession because you love it, then you keep at it, because you can't let up. Would you want to go to a lawyer that didn't put in the work and the effort? And I think the answer is no. So.
Being a lawyer is a service
Yes.
for the people.
Mhm.
Okay, I like that. With the amount of decisions that you all make on a daily basis, I don't know if you are in charge of anything important, but I would love to know, when you go home, how do you unwind? How do you center yourself? How do you relax with thousands of people coming through these doors every single day? I know myself, you get home and you're like, wow, I saw a lot of eyeballs today. Had a lot of conversations. So I'm sure even more so for you. So how do you stay centered, and how do you relax?
I walk. I'm a walker. I wish I could say I went to the gym and worked out and everything, but I like to walk. I like to walk outside.
Me too.
I like long walks to sort of de-stress family and friends, and you know, laughter is good. You know, sometimes I love working together with Chief Judge Morin and our colleagues here at the court.
Really good colleagues.
You know, we have people who are dedicated, and I think we try not to take yourself too seriously.
Right.
And some days I just walk home and I get home and I realize I'm sitting there just staring, just for a moment to unwind. And I think for recharging, you know, we see in the courts people who come to the courts because they have an issue that they need to be resolved,
Right.
or sometimes because they are an issue that may need to be resolved.
Right.
But what I think I see mostly is that there are a lot of good people in this city where we live, the capital of our nation, and that most people really want our city and our community to work and to be a safe place. that's encouraging.
Mhm.
That when you can do something to help make that happen,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's what the courts do every day.
Well, Chief Judge Blackman-Riggs will tell you that we have a lot of evening events, and so our days are pretty
They're
long.
long, yeah.
Not too much time to decompress. I can tell you what I do not do.
Okay.
I do not watch any programs about law, courtrooms,
No Law and Order for
judges.
you?
No, I don't. I see enough of that during the day. I'm not entertained at all by any of the Hollywood interpretations about what we do on a daily basis. So I like to read about subjects that are not connected to my work.
Okay.
So,
Any particular ones?
well, right now I'm reading about quantum physics.
Oh, wow.
It's just
Quantum
this,
physics.
just this weird thing I started.
No, it's fascinating.
But
Speaking
it's-
of geeking,
I know.
Law library.
But I'm going to move
quantum
on to
physics.
something else. Sometimes I go to history, but I try not to deal with anything having to do with the law
No
when
law.
I'm home, and just
Got it.
think about subjects I am not going to face the next day.
Right, completely separate. I think it doesn't get as separate as quantum physics.
No,
or does it?
I'm not an expert. I just
Who
I
knows?
find it very fascinating.
I do as well.
I think I might tend toward Hallmark movies. Sometimes I have to confess, and HGTV.
Right. Everyone's
I
favorite
just said that to
channels,
sound smart.
Who doesn't love a good Hallmark movie? That's completely separate from reality. What, if any, phrase, quote, scripture, anything that someone even told you at some point in time really stuck with you, something that you really carry with you? I know you mentioned, about your mom and your grandma. I'm sure they instilled many things in you, but specifically you were talking about to whom much is given, much is required or expected. Any other kind of phrases that you all hold on to in your day-to-day?
The two that come to mind, I talk about my mom, my grandma, my dad. They had a lot of these folksy expressions to, I think, help keep us, my sisters and I, focused on what they think, and I believe is the main thing, that service is the price we pay, or the rent we pay for our time on
I like
earth.
that, yeah.
And that another one I like is the journey, not just the arrival, matters. And that sometimes we can be, as a society, as individuals, so focused on getting to whatever the next it is that we don't enjoy the journey. And I feel like life is a beautiful journey, and that we're blessed to serve and meet wonderful people along the way, and to leave it better than we found it. That's what keeps me going, I think.
Service.
Well, I have two sayings that sort of first comes sort of from my family, that you get more with a smile than a snarl
It's true.
when you're dealing with people. And I
Yeah.
try to keep that in mind,
Important.
because we're under a lot of, I don't want to say stressful, but we have a lot of pressure-packed
Mhm.
decisions to make.
Right.
There's no reason not to be pleasant about it.
Might as well.
And the other one that I just sort of keep in mind, that failure is just another opportunity to succeed. So all failure is temporary. It just gives you another opportunity to try something different and succeed that way. And we have to do a lot of that in our job.
Lots of opportunities there.
So we have lots of opportunities to succeed in our business. So I keep that in mind.
I love that. Those are great. I'll take those with me now. I think my favorite that my dad always said is, in the end, it will all be okay. And if it's not the end, if it's not okay, it's not the end.
It's not the end. That's a good one.
But this is the end of our broadcast today. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us here on Facebook Live. Thank you to both Chief Judges, Chief Judge Anna Blackburn-Rigsby and Chief Judge Robert Morin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having this
Absolutely. My
conversation.
pleasure.
It's been great.
Happy Law Day to you all. Thank you so much.